Hello, people. Danny Trio, how you doing?
What's up, Lee?
Today we are going to discuss the Colombo War of 1991, approximately to 1993. If people read about it, there's a lot of stuff left out, no matter how much research you do, and we're going to do the best we can here. But Danny, why don't you tell us how the war pretty much? Okay, all of a sudden you have Persico. He goes to prison, and he puts Vic Orena in power. So explain to us what happened and why he put him in power.
Well, I think essentially he put him in power because Alley Boy was going to jail. There was a rift in the families, and Vic Orena wanted to become a boss, and in simpler terms, he tried to take over the Colombo crime family from the Persicos. And it was a. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
One of the things about Persico, though, that why he liked Vic Orena also is Vic Orena was a big earner on the street, one of the biggest earners before Persico went into prison, and
absolutely.
And Persico kind of felt he owed him. But
I would agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so he puts Orena in charge, and at that point, when Arena's in charge, Orena starts getting grandeur of taking the family over. Explain to us some of the moves that he was doing to take the family over.
Well, when the war began, obviously the Orena faction was a lot bigger than the Persico clan, and Vic thought that he had the upper hand against these guys, but Persico had legitimate killers in his crew, and I'm saying Vic didn't, but Persico was more, better equipped to handle this war, in my opinion, because of who he had in his corner. And you call Scarpa a rat or whatever, but the guy was a complete psychopath, and he was one of the leading captains on Persico's side that was doing a lot of damage to the Vic Orena side.
So Vic Orena, at that point, he pretty much came to the conclusion that if he took out Greg Scarpa, the war would be over.
That was his thinking, absolutely.
So in November of 1991, he made a move on Greg Scarpa. But the problem is when he went after Scarpa, he also shot into. They also shot into the car of Scarpa's daughter, and there was the grandbaby was in the car, and Scarpa was furious about this.
Correct. Yeah,
and
that was. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
Just to go back a little bit, the first killing that took place, I think it was in June of '91, was a guy by the name of Frank Marassa. I believe that was the initial killings. That's where the initial killing started. And Vic, June 20th, I believe he was the acting boss, stalked by a hit team. He was also slated to be killed outside his home. No shots were fired, though. And and then obviously November 18th was the big thing with Scarpa.
And the thing about Scarpa, at that time when they went after him, he was battling AIDS. He was a very sick man. It's not like he was that young guy, that young killer that he used to be. I mean, he was a sick man, but the guy went to war and with Larry Mazza at his side, and he went after the guys that were responsible. I think it was Vinny Facero was one of in December 7th. He killed him by Scarpa, and that was the beginning of the revenge, along with Hank Smurra. Danny, is that his name?
Yeah.
Okay, and tell us what happened there with Hank Smurra.
Well, they caught him in the car and they killed him. Essentially. I don't know exactly how it transpired, other than the fact that he was an important role, in this war, and he got taken out inside his car. I believe it was a Cadillac that he shot.
And it was two people, and it was also Nicky Black was involved with that. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I believe that's who Maz's claim to fame is of shooting Nicky Black in the face with a shotgun because Scarpa's gun jammed or he wasn't in a position to shoot him. And Larry, the rat, obviously shot him in the face and killed him.
Right. And so here we go. So the war started. They got back at the people that came to get them. So what was being done by Vic Orena? I mean, did they get intimidated right away where they started hiding and stuff?
Well, I think they did because I don't think they expected this kind of outcome. I think they were very confident, and if they took out Scarpa, that would be the end of Persico per se. And quite frankly, knowing that he was as sick as he was, that was furthest thing from the truth because they couldn't achieve that, and now they were on the defensive because they didn't know what was going to happen now. And
then they went after Joe Waverly. They had a couple of shootouts with him actually, and so here we go. We got this side of the family going after the other side of the family, the side that's supposed to win. And it seemed like for most of the war, they were on the defensive, weren't they?
I believe for the most part they were. And I think that was a little confusing to them because the outcome that they thought and figured on obviously was a lot different than what happened.
And then on May 22nd of 92, they murdered Larry how do you say that last name? Lampazzi?
Yeah, Lampazzi.
Okay, and they murdered him. So at that point, the war started winding down. Would you say that was it going to wind down at that time, or was there more killings to come?
There was more killings to come. I think the last killing, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, was in October of '93, where Joey Scopo was ultimately shot and killed, which was considered one of the final murders of the Colombo Crime Family War. That's what I believe. That there are some stories different to that, but either way, around that time was the last killing.
And Joey Scopo was a pretty powerful member of that side of the war.
Yeah, he was a captain, and yeah.
And so they took him out. So was there anybody big really taken out on the side of the Persico faction?
Not really. They lost some people, but it was nothing to what Vic lost. They took a beating, and hence the Persico family, remained in power. And to the day he died, the Persicos were still in power when Carmine passed away.
And his son took over. And one of the guys that skated through this war, that part of the war at that time, was Bill Catullo. Bill Catullo was on the Vic Orena side. And so they decided that when the war was over, they brought him into the picture. They brought him on his side, right?
Exactly. And, to Wild Bill's credit, the Persicos were very leery, and they were afraid of Wild Bill because Wild Bill was a lot different than Vic Orena. He was a different type of gangster, not taking anything away from Vic, but he was legitimately feared of taking over the Colombo crime family. And hence, obviously everybody knows what happened to him.
And after the war was over, it came out that Linda Vecchio, who was found innocent, by the way, and he was an agent, he was feeding information to Scarpa during the war.
I believe there's no question in my mind, and should be anybody else's, that he played a pivotal hand in this war. And even though he was acquitted of the charges, I firmly believe he was pretty instrumental in the Colombo War, directly involved with Scarpa.
Why do you think he was not convicted? I mean, did they have a strong case against him, or they just didn't?
Well, I guess they did. They felt they did. Again, the jury decided that the information that they had, they couldn't convict him on whatever they had. But you can rest assured, he had a lot to do with this Colombo crime family war. and I believe that he was feeding information 100%. And I think it was, legitimately thought that he was doing that. And unfortunately, he wasn't convicted on anything. So.
And so then you had who became in charge of the family once the war ended?
I think Carmine remained, the boss of the Colombo crime family.
And was little Alley Boy at that time? Did he take over in the streets?
Well, yeah, I think he was an acting boss, but obviously that was just in a title. Carmine was the one calling all the shots. So it is what it is.
And Carmine did not want to give up any power, even though he was in prison.
Absolutely not. And I think that even though he was in prison for so many years, he still was able to reign over the Colombo crime family because he had a lot of loyalists that were loyal to him and his family, his Persico family. So that's why I believe he stayed in power as long as he did.
And people think that it was just, 13 people were killed in the war. There was a couple innocent people that were shot in the war. But it actually wound up wiping out 50% of the family because some became witnesses. Some went to prison.
Correct.
So this had a major impact on the family. It pretty much at that time just weakened the family.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you got to remember too, the Colombo crime family was the smallest of the other four families, and with this war, it took a toll on the Colombo crime family. Not only in casualties, but in people becoming informants. So the Colombo crime family was able to hold its own under the leadership of Carmine Persico. Whether you like him or not, he was able to rule with an iron hand.
And John Gotti, it didn't really matter because he wound up going to prison. So the family, it was nothing more he could do to be involved in the war. He was in prison. Carmine was in prison, and soon Scarpa went to prison. And so
He died. Yeah.
And you had, once he went to prison, though, you had Wild Bill Catullo left. You had Alley Boy left, and a lot of that side of the family, that faction, the Persico faction that was left.
Once Alley Boy was convicted of the gun charge, that's when Catullo was going to make his move and try to become boss. And unfortunately, they beat him to the punch and subsequently killed him.
And that's the thing, because Catullo, a lot of people say that he was the last casualty of the war, even though it was several years later.
Right, you can argue that point. Absolutely, sure.
They wanted him close, and they kept him close. And when the time came, they took him out. Do you think that Catullo was actually behind the scenes making a plan to take over the family?
I do. I definitely do. But you got to remember too, and I say this not in disrespect of Wild Bill. A lot of his own men didn't like him. They feared him. He wasn't a guy that knew how to talk to his crew members. He was very direct and very to the point. He didn't give a shit what you thought of him. And, he was hard to get along with. And I think that might have, if he did make the move, I think that would have had an impact on whether he became boss or not, because he wasn't very well liked. But again, it's about fearing somebody, and I think fear, trumps a lot of other things.
Did Larry Mazza, he became a rat. Did Larry Mazza, do you think that he put a lot of fiction into the story of the war?
Oh, I unequivocally think he did. I think he does. I think that Larry Mazza embellishes on a lot of things to make himself relevant. And not to say he wasn't in the street, but Larry Mazza is what he is, a rat. And he can write all the books he wants and spin whatever tales he wants. But the fact of the matter is that, he is who he is.
And out of these rats that we have, like Catullo Jr. and say Calandra and these other rats, whether you like Larry Mazza or not, there's no doubt that he was at Scarpa's side. Is that pretty accurate?
Well, of course he was. Listen, there's no argument, as far as I'm concerned, on what his role was in organized crime. In my opinion, I don't think he was a made member. You guys can call me crazy, tell me what you want. I don't give a shit. But I don't believe he was made. I don't care what the charts say. But Larry Mazza survived by the skin of his teeth, and he's lucky he made it out because it is what it is. Because he was not, he wasn't a key player. Let's put it to you that way. He was a guy that had to do a job, and he did it by killing Nicky Black, and the only reason he killed him is because, in my opinion, either Greg wasn't in a position to shoot him, and/or his gun was jammed. So what do? You got to shoot. So, and that's what I believe Mazza did.
And I guess Greg Scarpa was not the type of guy that would not shoot. It sounds like to me Scarpa was the guy that wanted to do the killing.
Right. And what I mean by not being able to, he wasn't in a position to, and/or the gun just jammed. So I believe Larry was on the passenger side of the vehicle, and that's where Nicky Black was, and it was easier for for Mazza to shoot him as opposed to Greg. But Greg would have killed him anyway. And
Scarpa wound up losing his eye shortly after the war too, because he got involved with something with his son, and a drug dealer shot him in the eye. Right?
Yeah, I forget the guy. The guy's in the witness protection program. If he's still alive, I forget his name. He's an Irish kid, and his name escapes me at this time. But obviously, Rosa was there with him, shot him, hit him in the eye, which was just a freak thing. And even though he got shot in the eye, he returned fire, went home. And it is what it is. I mean,
would he go home and make coffee and sit down? I mean,
I don't know what he did, but the guy had a hole in his fucking eye. He had in his head. He had no eyeball. And what can you say? I mean, of course he was a rat, but who gets shot in the fucking eye and goes home? I mean, it's just a weird and wild story, and it goes to who Greg was. Yes, he was a rat, but by all intents and purposes, he was a complete nut job, and he was what he was.
And I believe that him having ties to the FBI at that time gave that side of the family, that faction, a big advantage in the war, especially if Delvecchio's feeding him information during that war.
No question about it. He had carte blanche. He had firsthand knowledge. And so, yes, he was ahead of the game, 100%.
It just goes to show you how one man could change things. People could say Wild Bill Catullo was a tough guy and stuff, but it sounds like out of all these guys, Greg Scarpa was the real tough guy out of all these guys.
He was definitely one of the toughest. He was feared all over the place. You mentioned his name, and people, they feared him because irregardless of what he was, a rat, the guy was definitely a key player and a key captain in the Colombo crime family.
Yeah.
For, as many years as he was ratting, 30 years, 35 years, whatever it was.
Do you think he was ratting?
Maybe longer.
Do you think he was ratting to give himself an advantage in the family? Or was he doing like Whitey Bulger, taking people out of the way with his ratting? What do you think?
Well, I think when he began ratting, it was self-serving, and then it just developed, into, well, hey, listen, I could do something here with this and make myself, in a position where I could do what I want to do. And to his credit, he diabolically did that. I mean, he was doing murders and informing on people at the same time.
Does anybody have any idea how many men this guy Scarpa killed?
Who knows? I'm sure that Scarpa has killed, over 50 men,
Wow.
Probably more. So, but, again, who the hell knows? I don't know. But the guy was definitely a force to be reckoned with, even though he was a rat. He did his thing. And in the street, he was feared all over the place from every family, in my opinion.
And out of this war, eventually a lot of rats came out of it that were involved in the war. And it really, like Carmine Sessa, guys like that, they just a lot of these guys became rats. But it's just an amazing story, Danny, because when I got in and started researching it, I didn't realize how outgunned Persico's side was. A matter of fact, Vic Orena was ready for the war. He thought he was going to win the war easy. Take out Scarpa, it's over.
Correct. And again, like I said earlier, there was a misjudgment, and he thought by taking out the biggest lion, everybody else would be tamed. And it didn't work out like that. They underestimated who Greg Scarpa was, and not to say they didn't know who he was or what he was capable of, but they figured that they could kill him, and they tried. They tried, and you want to believe the guy has 9 lives? He probably did at that time.
It's kind of funny because they go after him. You would figure that, knowing the type of guy he was, that they would have a better planned hit, because it just backfired. Yeah.
Well, again, Greg Scarpa was not your average man, and it's kill or be killed. And he was the type of guy that if that was going to happen, he was going to go down in a blaze of glory. And he figured that's what was going to happen. He got shot in the eye and he lived. Who the fuck gets shot in the eye and lives?
And when you think about it, he probably came out of the war with the biggest reputation after the war.
Oh, no question about it. And again, there's people that say that Persico knew he was ratting. I don't think anybody can say they know that for a fact. Do I think Carmine would have did something irregardless of who Scarpa was? Absolutely, because it's a threat against the whole regime. But, anything is possible, I guess,
Danny, the Colombo family is a kind of funny family because it was the smallest family, but they seem like they had some really, really tough guys in that family.
Well, if you go back to 1961 or 60 or 61, when the initial war per se started, you had nothing but killers in that family. And the Gallo crew was, unbelievable.
That was the Profaci Gallo War, the very first war. And then the
absolutely.
Gallos were involved in a second war in the early 70s, and it was they were against the Colombos, the Gallos.
Oh yeah. It's just crazy. I mean, if you look at the history of the Colombo crime family, irregardless of how you feel about them, they put themselves on the map. Whether it was feuding with each other or killing other people, the fact of the matter is the Colombo crime family deserved to be in that realm of tough guys.
And would you think, because of all this 3 wars, the infighting, it really hurt the family during these decades? I mean, you had a war in the 60s, you had a war in the 70s, you had a war in the 90s. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, even Breslin wrote about them, the gang that couldn't shoot straight. They were just out there just fucking popping people and shooting and just, just causing all kinds of havoc, It was just crazy. They have a history of this,
And they even used, eventually they used 2 people to do the killing outside the diner. And they weren't even in the family. They just went out and got somebody off the street.
Well, yeah, exactly. And here's a case in point. In 1961, Aniello Della Croce was in a restaurant in Manhattan, Luna, and he was severely beaten by the Gallo gang. And here's a guy that was a Colombo Gambino crime family figure, and at that time he was up and coming, but he was still a force to be reckoned with and well respected. And here they went in there, dragged him out, and beat the shit out of him, and they beat him up pretty bad.
And there was no revenge taken for that?
I think there was, but nothing happened to them. The Gallo gang that did beat them up, and I forget who did, but I think there was an attempt, but it fell to the wayside, and I think it was eventually squashed. So whatever it was. The fact of the matter is that they didn't give a shit.
And Joey went to prison. Joey went to prison, and then when Joey gets out, there's another war again.
Yeah.
So he's pretty much involved in 2 of these wars.
Oh, absolutely,
and everybody knows.
He was another nut job as well. Everybody knows that. He was nuts too.
It's amazing. I research all these families, and I'll tell you the best characters to me are in the Colombo family.
Oh, by far. I mean, and not to say that None of the other families had. They were, and I don't want to say the Colombo crime family was dumb, but they were. They were a crew that, a family that, all they thought about and did were violent acts. There was no thought process like Gambino or Genovese or even Lucchese and the Bonanno crime families. They acted, and there was nothing thought out, in my opinion.
And eventually, even Sammy Gravano came out of the Colombo family.
Yeah, correct. He was, yeah.
So I mean, so you had guys that came out of that family too, and went into other families. It's just an amazing story, Danny. I just find I appreciate you coming on and doing the Colombo story with me, and I'll put the video up. And people, if we missed anything underneath, let us know what you think we missed. All we can do is do the stories and try to do the best we can, right, Danny?
And again, this is, you could spend hours talking about the Colombo crime family, dissecting each person that got murdered. Who has time to do that? I don't have, or we don't have, the necessary hours in a day to sit here and dissect it. But there was a quick synopsis of basically what happened in the Colombo crime family. And each character is interesting in his own right, from Scarpa to a lot of guys. Just
different, you had Alley Boy, you had Catullo,
members.
Even Nicky Black
got
killed. You look at Larry Mazza now, whether you like him or not, he's a character now. The Sessa, the Sessa's, Lampisi, another guy. And then you got even Linda Vecchio, an agent that was involved with this damn family. It's amazing.
Yeah, so the characters even from the Gallo clan, where it basically started. You had a midget. You had all kinds of different characters that made the Colombo crime family what it is today.
You had a midget. You had a lion in the basement. You had Joey Gallo.
It was crazy.
Just that family alone, and then you had Joe Colombo. Let's not forget Joe Colombo. He was a character. I mean, look at the way he died. Well, the man got shot and still lived for how many years in a bed?
I think 7 or 8 years, exactly.
And he should have died from his
absolutely. Wound. Yeah. So the characters are endless, and they're if you go by a chart and look each and every one of them up, or look at old newspaper articles, they're quite comical. The things that they said and did, I find very interesting and intriguing on how they acted and what they did. I mean, they didn't give a shit.
Yeah, and like I said,
and again, no question about it. And I don't mean to cut you off, but before I lose this thought, and here you had a bunch of killers in the Gallo family that rescued kids from a fire. You know what I'm saying? So they were a diabolical bunch. Did they have empathy for people? I guess so. The proof was in the fire. They went up there and saved them people. And they actually went up there and grabbed them out of fire and flames. So
and that family was also pretty much given, maybe unfairly, credit with the Godfather movie. It was Joe Colombo that had the power because of the organizations that he started to stop that movie, and they had to convince Joe Gallo to make the movie. Even there, they're involved. So it's just a fascinating story, Danny. And
it is.
Well, people, I hope you like this. Let me put underneath here, just so you do know, if you want to donate, right there you have my PayPal and the Cash App, and I would appreciate it. If not, totally understand. We're going to be doing a live tomorrow. I hope you guys like this, and everybody take care. And please hit the like button on this. Danny, thank you so much.
Thanks, Lee. I'll talk to you tomorrow, pal.
Okay.